G'day everybody, Simon here, Explosive Action, back with another video. Today we're going to take a look at Carcass clones, bands that are rotten to the gore. Let's get into it.
The pathologist may be able to take fingerprints from the body, but if decay has set in, things become more complicated.
I've mentioned on this channel before that Carcass are my favourite band, and Necroticism is my favourite album of all time, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it was dawning on me recently that there's been a bit of a resurgence in Carcass clone bands, and I wanted to do a video to talk about how early that's been going on. And a couple of things made me realize this and made me come up with this topic. Number one, I saw the band recently. Just a couple of weeks ago, Carcass came out here, had a headline tour, and they played not so much in the pathological gore grind. They did play a couple of tracks off Symphonies, a very Necroticism, Heartwork, and very much the latest album kind of mix there. So interesting show, and they always just brought the quality, of course. Even if the songs weren't exactly the kind of ones I would have picked, a great set anyway. Lots of fun was had, much headbanging. But also before that, earlier in January, I was in hospital. Yeah, my appendix, it said it wanted to come out. Unfortunately, it still hasn't come out. We'll get to that. But yeah, I was in hospital and I had to have some procedures done. And as I was laying there looking around at all the medical equipment, I started getting that sort of impaled and hospital vibe. And that was just taking me back to Carcass. So I thought, time to do a video to talk about all the Carcass clones going back from the early days. Before we get into the clones, we should talk very briefly about the band Carcass themselves. If for some reason you don't know who they are, I doubt you would have clicked this video, but just in case, we start very early on in 1987 with this, obviously, bootleg of 1987's flesh-ripping Sonic Torment demo. This thing is essentially the start of gore grind, particularly that pathological, medical-themed gore grind. So grindcore itself has already had a base in Napalm Death and Repulsion, other bands at the time, but Carcass were the first to go medical. Along with that came a thicker and nastier sound, deep vocals alternating with raspy vocals. Bill Steer, he dominates the vocals on this one with his lows, but the mid-range are not done by Jeff Walker that we would come to know. The mid-range vocals are done from this mystery guy named Sanjeev. Very little is known about him. There's a photo of him on the Metal Archives I'll put here, but not so much is known about him. Jeff did do the band's logo, though, which is a classic. And yeah, at the back here, we get all cutouts from the demo tape itself. It's quite a good quality bootleg, I've got to say. Most of the tracks on this demo do feature on the full-length debut album that we're going to talk about in a second. But there are tracks on here, like the last one, Face Meltag, that didn't make their way off this demo. But the bizarre thing is the production of this demo, although it's raw, is better than that of the full length. In 1988, we have the official full start of a subgenre here. This is Recoputrefaction. This is a quintessential album in the history of metal in general, the history of grindcore. So many things would not have happened without this album. So this is also one of the early Earache Records releases. This is Mosh number 6. 22 tracks of down-tuned, speedy, murky grindcore, which retroactively we call gore grind. Jeff is now picking up the mid-range vocals in here, along with Bill still doing his lows. Sanjeev has left. And as I said on the previous one, this is poorly produced compared to the demo. Apparently, sort of what happened here is Bill Steer said in an interview that the initial recording was completely ruined, and they had to hastily re-record the whole thing against the ticking clock of Earache's schedule, and that's why we got what we got. Now, in hindsight, like it's something you can love now. Like it sounds like a toilet, but so many bands, as we're going to discover, that came after this, that were inspired by this, also chose to sound like a toilet. So you've got to give them props there for unintentionally coming up with production values that match the theme of the music. Also, this Earache logo down here, this early one, was also done by Jeff Walker. So yeah, Good stuff, Jeff. And great debut album here, Recaputrefaction, 1988. In 1989, 1 year later, the band had improved so much, and they put out their Sophomore Symphonies of Sickness. So much improved, as just leaps and bounds ahead of Recaputrefaction. Longer songs, massively improved production, not clinical production. There's a joke in there somewhere, but it is more appropriate to the sound, I think, that they're going for. It's definitely what they wanted it to sound like. They wanted Reek to sound like this. So Symphonies really is the ideal Carcass sound for the early period. It's, on a given day, my second favorite album of all time. Sometimes it's my favorite. If I'm listening to it, it becomes my favorite. But anyway, I love the minimal feel of this thing. Even this font that they used on the back here, that is in clone bands that we're going to get to. People have reused the font when they're doing their bands. At least 2 tracks from this album still make it into their live set list. I got to see 2 weeks ago Recaputrefaction, the song, not the album, and Exhumed to Consume still comes out. So yeah, an absolutely monumental album in death grind, in gore grind, in death metal in general. Symphonies of Sickness from 1989. And although there are many more albums than this one I'm going to show, and the band are still active and still producing new albums, the last one that is really worth mentioning in terms of Carcass clones is 1991's Necroticism, Descanting the Insalubrious. My favorite album of all time from any band in any genre. 2 years have passed. The band have added second guitarist Michael Amott, who's moved on since to Arch Enemy. When the band had their reformation tour in 2008, Michael Amott joined briefly, but he left the band in 2012 when they recorded Surgical Steel, got a new lineup. But for me, this is the band at their most creative, while still sticking to the roots of pathological gore grind. As I said, my favorite album of all time. The flow of this album is perfect. The humor in all the medical samples is perfect. I know every second of those samples back to front. When you see them live, all you need is half a second of one of the samples, and you know what song is coming next. The mix of Bill and Jeff's vocals here is really well done. The dominance of Bill is moved away. We have more Jeff, but it's a great mix between the two. Kind of more of a good cop, bad cop situation. Ken's drumming is the best it's ever been. Absolutely on point. 1 foot blast technique is still strong. A lot more use of double kick, and it's just a better recording, a better musicianship from everybody. Everyone's firing on all cylinders. And the video clip for Incarnate Solvent Abuse is absolutely hilarious and worth the price of entry alone. 1991's Necroticism, Descanting the Insalubrious.
Oh my God, what are these? You can hear people puking. They're dog meat.
So it's time now we talk about the clone bands, Carcass clones, bands that play in the gore grind style, but haven't devolved or evolved too much from the formula of the albums and the demo that I just showed. I'm not going to be talking about bands that are more gore noise, no Last Days of Humanity, for example. That's far too removed from that core Carcass sound. Also not involving bands that are more humor than and grindcore than they are gore grind. Bloodduster, for example, even the Fisting the Dead EP or album doesn't really qualify as a Carcass clone. The bulk of what I'm showing here is medical, pathological gore grind. A few exceptions where the music speaks for itself, but really, that's what we're talking about here. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is one I don't have a physical copy of, and it is probably one of the most influential and well-timed Carcass clones. We're talking about Xysma with their 1989 demo, Swarming of the Maggots. Thinking of the time this came out, you've only had Recaputrefaction. Symphonies of Sickness is just about to come out, and they've released their demo. These Finnish kids have been listening to Recaputrefaction, probably the demo as well, and have come up with their own emulation, down-tuned, messy, gory blast beats, the distorted vocals. It's exactly what you would expect from a band trying to sound just like Recaputrefaction. In fact, they submitted it to Earache Records, and Jeff Walker heard it. He thought it was a good try, but the band ultimately didn't get picked up by Earache. But the putrid, pitch shifted sound, the distorted bass on this is disgusting. In a way, it out Carcass on their own demo here. The band, obviously, as we know, quickly changed by their full length album. Yeah, they become a bit of a death and roll band, and ever since then, it's basically been some theme of surf rock or indie rock. So the band has changed quite a lot, but the 1989 Zeismer demo, Swarming of the Maggots, is definitely the first Carcass clone. So another vintage example of classic early Carcass worship, would you believe, came from Swedish death metal band Carnage. That's right, they had a demo in 1989 that was very different to the work that came out on the Dark Recollections album. 1989, they did their very first demo, 3 tracks, and it is very much Reeker Putrefaction. That's exactly what you get, and it's Michael Amott. That's right, the same Michael Amott that went on to be in Carcass on Necroticism. It's amazing how these things just all come full circle. But as well as that, the vocals on this one are from Johan Levy, I think is how you say his name, who became the singer for Arch Enemy in their first 2 albums, Black Earth and Stigmata, also with Michael Amott. So there you go, a little bit of history there. Only 3 tracks of just pathological gore grind from the very early days, because it was. The first full-length album I can think of that is a Carcass clone, definitely playing in that style, comes out of Norway, and that is 1990s Hallucinating Anxiety from Cadaver. Great debut album here. It keeps that gory theme. I mean, we've got the big, like, cow eyeball sitting in a pool of just giblets or something there. It is a sound they didn't continue with, even by their second album, In Pains. The band went a bit more just straight ahead death metal, but here it's definitely in that gore grind, death grind style. They're evolving a little bit away from Carcass, but really they're staying pretty close to that Symphonies of Sickness formula, but just a bit more grindcore to it. That's pretty much what you get here. And this is one of Jeff Walker's signings. He had a sub-label of Earache called Necrosis, and this was one of the signings. So yeah, that's a bit of an endorsement there. If Jeff Walker has a label and he signed your Carcass clone to it, he must like it. So yeah, Cadaver, Hallucinating Anxiety, 1990, pretty much the first full-length Carcass clone. We go to 1991 and we go to Poland for a hugely influential band, Dead Infection, with their first demo here, World Full of Remains. Oh, there's some remains there on the beach. As I said, Polish band following that Reeker Putrefaction sound pretty closely on the demos. They refined their sound a little bit more on the Start Human Slaughter demo. This one's the one I prefer. And even again, which is kind of where they've stayed since, we have the Surgical Disembowelment full-length album. And by this point, they just sound like Dead Infection, and they become their own thing. But really, on these first 2 demos, you can absolutely hear that Reeker Putrefaction, Symphonies of Sickness connection from the cover artwork, the sound. It's just fantastic. It's gory. It's heavy. It's quality stuff here from Dead Infection, 1991, with World Full of Remains and Start Human Slaughter, 2 essential demos. In 1992, we go to Czechia. We have one of the better pure Carcass clone bands that there ever was, and they did only 2 albums. I'm talking about Pathologist here with Putrefactive and Cadaverous odes about necroticism. Oh, there's going to be a few of these tonight. And the follow-up, Grinding Opus of Forensic Medical Problems. Now, you can already see with this one here, that font at the top is the same font used on the back of the Symphonies of Sickness LP. So that connection is strong. The cover artwork on both is straight from Reeker Putrefaction, just dead bodies in a medical kind of theme here. you know exactly when you're going to get, and it's so early, 1992 and then 1993. Just absolute classics for me of the subgenre. I've had these CDs. You can see it's dusty as. These are the originals. I've had them since the mid and late 90s. They practically outdo Carcass at their own subgenre here. It is, as I said, pure Symphonies of Sickness worship, with the Bill Steer style processed lows, even lower on these albums. But more impressive is it keeps those sort of Bill Steer style lead guitars. So that's what really makes you connect with the Symphonies of Sickness there. It's not just rabid grindcore. It has that melody in it, and it has that that focus on musicality at the same time, by still being pathological. The band even released a VHS, which looks like it's altered live footage with lots of early '90s digital effects, but I think it's just the album recording playing behind it. Doesn't sound live at all, but it's a cool little novelty there. It's a 30-minute VHS, very hard to find, but yeah, these are just amazing. I mean, it's got a yellow spine and everything. There's the guys there. The other album there, got my old Modern Invasion seal of approval triangle on it. So yeah, these are the original ones here from Pathologist. Probably my favorite overall Carcass clone band, probably because I've been playing them for so many bloody years at this point. But yeah, absolutely outstanding stuff. I'm going to try the names again. 1992, Putrefactive and Cadaverous Odes About Necroticism, nailed at that time. And 1993's grinding opus of forensic medical problems, Essential Carcass Clones. Still in 1992, but over in America now, we have the very early works of Exhumed, a band that I think most people would know. This is a compilation here, Platters of Splatter, a cyclopedic symposium of execrable errata and abhorrent apocryphia. Oh, but the demo we're talking about, which is on here, is Dissecting the Seceded Omentum demo from 1992. An incredibly ugly production on this thing, undeniably gore grind with that reek of putrefaction, Symphonies of Sickness influence. But it's got more of an American death metal swagger. You can hear it even in their demo ages. Doesn't sound a thing like Exhumed do now. It doesn't even sound that close to what they were doing on, say, Gore Metal and Slaughter Cult. Their demo days, they were saying very, very close to the Carcass formula, the early stuff. As I said, the band very quickly found their own style by Gore Metal. These days, they're a bit more horror metal themed. I mean, one of the albums is just called VHS, I think, and it's all very much VHS horror and that kind of stuff. So they've got their own thing. It's not so much pathological gore grind, but yeah, back in these days, I mean, just look at the quantity of the tracks on here. They were definitely playing in the gore grind and in the pathological gore grind specifically. So yeah, it's essential stuff, really. Exhumed's early day stuff is just as good as their later stuff, but it's just very, very different. So yeah, Exhumed, Dissecting the Seceded Omentum demo, available on the Platters of Splatter compilation. Going to Sweden now in 1993. This is almost the poster child of a Carcass clone. I'm talking about General Surgery with Necrology. This initially is comprised of anonymized dismember and carbonized members. It may have changed over the years, but at this point, you're basically getting dismember and carbonized. The opening track on here, Ominous Lamentation, is essentially a collection of riffs only slightly removed from Symphonies of Sickness. It is very much a clone. Dual vocals, pathological riffs. What makes this very interesting is Sweden. It's got the Sunlight Studio production and mix on it. Makes it sound like a God Macabre album. So that big, heavy Swedish, that Stockholm sound. But Carcass clone, Carcass worship. This was originally released as a 7-inch in the same year. This is the Relapse Records version that came out the same year. That's got 2 extra tracks on it to give it a bit more of a runtime. So it's about 20 minutes or so. But yeah, Necrology from General Surgery out of Sweden. I think the band might still be going. If not, I mean, they at least did a few more EPs and some albums pretty recently. But yeah, for that Symphonies of Sickness worship, you could do far worse than picking up Necrology. Staying in 1993, staying in Sweden, not talking about necrology, but talking about necrony. This is Pathological Performances. With a title like that, you know what you're going to get. Very much the Symphonies of Sickness worship here. Infamous, actually, of being a short-lived project, a splinter project to Nasum. We know how big Nasum got. They only did this one album, and it's more Swedish death metal take on that symphony sound again. However, in 1994, and this is the most obvious Carcass thing I've shown so far, they released this EP of cover songs. Yeah, this is called Necroticism, Distorting the Originals. Absolutely classic. Obviously, the Necroticism cover artwork there, they've redone. Just fantastic. Absolutely love this EP. And the tracks on it, this is an old CD single thing. Flip it open. We get covers of Fermenting Innards, Swarming Vulgar Mass of Infected Virulency, Die in Pain, and Macupurulence Execrator. They're the Carcass tracks on here. But they also cover Bolt Thrower. There's a Napalm Death on here. And yeah, it's a really, really fun little EP. But I mean, that's the most obvious you're going to get for a Carcass clone there, where they actually cover Carcass songs. But the album stands alone here. It's really, really good stuff. They play it very Necroticism style, I think. The production is thicker, crunchier. On this EP, it actually had Dan Svania doing the mix. I'm not too sure who did the album, but yeah, fantastic. This is out on Pooza Slaughter Records, another Modern Invasion triangle on there. So yeah, had this one for 25 years at this point. Really, really great album. I need to play it more often, to be honest. Still got this $30 price sticker on it from wherever I got it from. Necrony out of Sweden, 1993. Pathological Performances. Really, really good. Symphonies of Sickness worship. 1994 now, and going back to Czechia, this is a band I don't have much of, and that is probably a good thing. The band changed trajectories back in the early 2000s. I'm talking about Malignant Tumor. Now, by this came out in this 7-inch is just representative of the band. The one I'm actually talking about is the 1994 demo called Symphonies for Pathologists. Pretty obvious what that's going to sound like. But by the 2000s, the band started to get a bit more mincecore, sounding like Agathocles. But now they look and sound like Motorhead, but just sped up. Like a thrashier Motorhead. They've got the big handlebar mustaches, the big sunnies. The whole band look like Lemmy. It's quite the shift. And they've kind of, we'll get to them a little bit later, Malignant Tumor. They're going to make a second appearance, and some of it comes full circle. But yeah, I mean, even on this 7-inch here, Forensic Clinicism, the Sanguine article, that actually is a song off Necroticism. They're not covering that song on here. That's just what they named the EP. But the demo itself is just nasty sounding, Recaputrefaction, Symphonies of Sickness kind of worship. That's their most relevant release, I think, for the kind of sound that we're talking about here from 1994. The title, it says, like Symphonies for Pathologists, you know exactly what you're going to get. To be fair, though, it's not symphonies. It is closer to Reek. It is quite nasty and sloppy. So, yeah, but it does have a clean production. You know, it's played loose, but it's very clean. Probably because it's 1994 and people were just tuning things a bit better. But anyway, Malignant Tumor, not this 7-inch specifically, but the Symphonies for Pathologist demo from 1994. Really, really good stuff, and I would love to get a copy of it. Going back to Sweden here, in 1994, we have a band that had become one of those bands that have their own clones. We're at cloneception territory already, and I am talking about the fantastic debut from Regurgitate, Effortless Regurgitation of Bright Red Blood. What a quality title. What a poor sap this guy is. He's had a bad day. Very nasty, but a very classic album, this one. Feels like it should have come out earlier than 1994. I would have said 1989 or something like that. And where this is a little different, and you could almost argue, is this really a Carcass clone? But I think it does get included here. There is a little bit more D-beat in this than Carcass, and a bit more traditional grindcore, sort of 4-count blast beat kind of stuff. Does have the pitch shifted vocals. Obviously, it's got the gore theme, and like I said, this period of early Regurgitate has referenced and become a reference point and an influence for so many bands later. So, yeah, that itself is worth including them. And look, honestly, it's a Carcass clone. Don't kid yourselves. This stuff is just in that reputrefaction with a bit more punky edge to it. That's what you get with Regurgitate. So yeah, fantastic stuff. I've also got this compilation here, the Torture Sessions, which is all of the EPs that they did. Just obviously the fantastic Fulci artwork here. So yeah, the band is still going, I think, or if not, they only recently broke up. They did plenty of good work, lots of EPs, a handful of albums. Maybe they have broken up. I can't keep track anymore. But really, it's this early stuff here. This compilation of EPs and this debut album is the stuff you really want. Effortless Regurgitation of Bright Red Blood from 1994. So classic, it spawned its own subgenre. (1995) now, and going to Spain, and kind of similar to that Regurgitate sound, but maybe a bit more refined. We have Hemorrhage in their debut, Hermetic Cult. This has got the pitch-shifted gurgly vocals, and it's very similar to Regurgitate, but I'd say the songs fit closer to Symphonies of Sickness. So Hemorrhage probably doesn't, I wouldn't say, has clone bands as much itself. Regurgitate definitely does. Hemorrhage plays very similar to Regurgitate, but it's just that one step back closer to being a proper Carcass clone band. Has an added groove in there. Now, I think that's the thing you need when you're trying to sound like Symphonies of Sickness. You can't just be blasts. It has to have that groove in it. It has to the songs have to have that sort of break up in them, a bit more of a mix to them. Hemorrhage are definitely doing that. So absolutely a Carcass clone from the early days. Plenty of unhinged pathological gore grind on here. Very raw in the sound. Fantastic reissue. This one came out a couple of years ago. And yeah, highly recommended. Hemorrhage, they might still be going. They've got plenty of other albums that are worth checking out. Groom is another really good one. But yeah, Hermetic Cult. This is absolutely stellar stuff from 1995. Going to Germany now in 1996, and this has the honor of being the first Carcass clone that I ever bought. I would have bought it in about 1998, and I remember the shop I got it from too. And it's not immediately something that makes you go Carcass clone, but when you put that disc in there, there's no escaping it. This is Gollum with Eternity, the Weeping Horizons. Doesn't sound pathological, does it? No, but this is my one ace card, my one exception to the rules I set at the front. It is almost a note-for-note clone of Necroticism. It's got the dual vocals. It has that similar guitar structure, that more detailed sound to it than, say, Symphonies and Reek. But the lyrics, obviously the cover, nothing to do with gore. This is just your sort of death metal darkness and despair. That's the kind of stuff that Gollum were going about. But musically, there's not much that is closer to the Necroticism framework than this album from Gollum. Eternity, the Weeping Horizons, old Invasion Records release, and that's where I got it from. Fringe Art Records. Good old record store that used to exist in Newtown. When I do those shopping videos, I'm in Newtown, and I frequently go to one record shop there called Egg Records. That is either where Fringe Art was, or they were next door. It was right there. But anyway, long shut down shop, but I had some great fun picking up stuff from them. And Gollum, Eternity, the Weeping Horizons was one of them. 1996, pure Necroticism worship. Moving forward to 1999, and another album I picked up from that same Fringe Art record shop in Newtown. This is, look at that cover, Flesh Grinder from Brazil with Splatter, or as they say it in the vocals on the album, Splater. Splater. I don't know what's going on there. So their first album, Anatomy and Surgery, came out in 97 and is incredibly raw and actually quite sloppy. I don't have it. One, because it's actually not that brilliant, and two, good luck finding it for under $200. It's just not going to happen. But that's what it's got in it was transferred in here, and even better. This has got that demo era carcass and the reek sound and a bit of symphony sound and even a bit of necroticism sound. It really is a mix of everything carcass from the early days. It's just fantastic. I think the Splatter album is far better than their first one. But what you get that's interesting on here that is a little bit different is there's a little bit of that New York sort of suffocation, chuggy and stompy riffs in there. That's probably something you don't get in most Carcass clone bands, but really they do tend to stick to the formula. Fleshgrinder with Splatter out of Brazil. Ugh, gory stuff. In 1997, also out of Brazil, we have the very unique sounding, but still ultimately a Carcass clone band. This is Lymphatic Phlegm. This is the demo. Oh, malignant cancerous tumor in the epithelial tissue of the intestine. And there's the intestine. What a great cover. As I said, one of the more unique Carcass clone bands and Gorgrime bands in general. They had a drum machine. I don't know how many others had a drum machine, particularly at this point. The mix on this, though, the bass guitar is 500% louder than the 6-strings guitars. It's so strange, and it's got a jangly sound. It almost just sounds like the bass player is just playing like an electric fence wire or something. It is odd sounding, but it is completely the sound of Lymphatic Phlegm. Ultra pitch shifted vocals. They are massively processed. They are so deep. To me, this demo from Lymphatic Phlegm has the aura of an archaic, rusty 1950s hospital and surgery. Like you can almost see the flickering light and the manic doctor with a rusty scalpel. It is hugely in the pathological landscape. The band is still going, and it's a two-piece. Largely, they sound the same as they always did. They haven't really changed. Now, this was actually originally released as a demo tape in '94, but here it was reissued with another great cover with on a CD in 1999 with Fleshgrinders. What is this one? From Rotten Process to Anatomy demo. And this is where it's interesting because the demo material from Fleshgrinder here, it's a bit like Carcass itself. The demo is so much better than their first album, which they then made up for on their Sophomore, just like Carcass did. So I highly recommend this split because the demo tracks from both bands are utterly amazing. Really, really good stuff. And Fleshgrinder still have that sort of New York chuggish sound going on. I don't know where they got it from, but yeah, definitely not what you would get in a normal Carcass band. And Lymphatic Phlegm, definitely not what you get with a normal Carcass band. We're now in the new millennium, the year 2000, and one of my absolute favorite Carcass clone bands, one of my favorite bands in general. I really wish they did more albums, but in a way, it's kind of good that the albums they've done, there's only, I think, 5. They're just perfect. They're just absolutely perfect. Actually, it's probably just 4 and a few EPs. They're perfect. So wouldn't change a thing. And if that means having less of them, so be it. I'm talking about Impaled with The Dead Shall Dead Remain. Look at that. They've gone from the pathological gore grind to like just schoolboy humor. He's really messed up that toilet. Fantastic. This is sort of an exhumed Splinter project that added, funnily enough, more melody and more hooky leads into it. So yeah, it is the melodic cousin, I suppose, to exhumed, and it stays closer for a longer period of time to that rooted Carcass sound. They play very much in the symphonies to necroticism period. That melody definitely coming out of the necroticism era. Dead Shall Dead Remain, absolutely and sensational. Unfortunately, there's problems with the rights of this thing. The label that came out on Death Vomit Records, I don't know, but One, you can't find copies of it anymore. And the band lost the license and they had to re-record it. They re-recorded it as The Dead Still Dead Remain. It's not as good. It's lost the energy. So you really want to get the original. But what is even better for me, anyway, is their follow-up album. This is Mondo Medical, and this came out in either 01 or 02. I can't remember exactly. I didn't write it down. But this is the gore grind representation of the 2000s. Absolutely right here. They refined that sound to be just a perfect mix of death grind, a little bit of melodic death metal in there, just not your cheesy stuff, but the hooks in this thing. But it is still massively pathological and deviant Doctor. Like it's got samples like Carcass were doing on Necroticism, that same kind of humor, but it's even funnier on here because the band members are playing the Doctors. It is like I can quote this stuff as much as I can. Necroticism, absolutely essential. It's sort of got like that Michael Amott kind of leads from Necroticism. That's sort of what you get on this particular album from Impaled. Mondo Medical. Lyrically, as I said, they're nailing it with the Mad Doctor motif. Every song in here is essential. Raise the stakes, operating theatre, just crowd pleasers, absolutely crowd pleasers. And again, on Death Vomit Records, this one there isn't even a re-recording. It's just a good luck try and find it, which is such a shame because this is, for me, this is like top 20 death metal albums of all time. I absolutely love Mondo Medical. I don't particularly love this vinyl pressing. I play my CD. The vinyl pressing's not that great. Early 2000s vinyl, bit of a crapshoot. So yeah, stick to the CD if you can get it. But whatever you do, you need to get these albums from Impaled. The Dead Shall Dead Remain and Impaled's Mondo Medical. Just fantastic Carcass worship. Going forward to 2002, we have the County Medical Examiners, band out of America. And this band is known mostly for their perhaps controversial image. Supposedly, it's made up of, the band's a three-piece, made up of 2 junior doctors and a morgue attendant. Now, the likelihood of that is pretty low. I think it's been largely disproven, but also the band is quite anonymous. So, you never know. It could be real, but it's probably not. They did an album in 2002 called Forensic Fugues and Medicological Medleys, I think. I haven't been able to get that one. That is a Razorback Records release and was never reissued and goes for 3-figure sums, which I don't want to pay for some gore grind. Hopefully I can find a copy one day. But what I do have is this split with General Surgery, that band again from 2003. And General Surgery contributed new tracks, which is really, really good. As for the County side, this is less a clone. This is plagiarism, man. I reckon you could put some of the riffs up here on YouTube and I would get flagged for Carcass, not County Medical Examiners. Some of it is just, man, they've just like cut and pasted and reshuffled things around. But, the first song on here is essentially just Rica Putrefaction rearranged. But whatever. It's fun stuff. It's entertaining. It's pathological gore grind. And yeah, the General Surgery side's really good too. But County Medical Examiners, with their split here with General Surgery. But you do want to check out the debut album, Forensic Fugues and Medicological Medleys from 2002 for some Symphonies of Sickness worship. When researching this video, I already knew 98% of the bands I wanted to show, but I had a bit of a dig around to see if there's anything I missed. And this one band I hadn't even heard of, so therefore I don't have a copy of it. But there's a band from Finland, did an album, one and done. They did an EP and an album. But in 2004, a band called To Separate the Flesh from Bones, that's the band's name, they did an EP called For Those About to Rot, great title, and Utopia Sadistica, which was the full length. That's all they did. These guys, from what I've listened to online, played very much the Symphonies Necroticism style. As I said, Finnish band, 1 EP, 1 album, side project of Amorphous. So it's got Pasi, who was the vocalist on Elegy and a few of the albums after Elegy, playing gore grind. and also members of HIM, HIM, HIM. Yeah, that goth band. Yes, that band doing Gore Grind. Particularly the EP, for those about to rot, that's very in line with Symphonies. Has a clean early 2000s production. Everything's crisp and clear. It's not as slimy as you might get on some of the earlier 90s things, but 25 tracks on the album with guest vocalists from Lee Dorian, who was in Napalm Death, but also Jeff Walker himself shows up. So that's a ringing endorsement, and another reason I need to pick up a copy of the EP For Those About to Rot and Utopia Sadistica from To Separate the Flesh from Bones out of Finland. We take a bit of a leap now from 2004 to 2020. I'm not too sure what happened in that gap, and I'm going to ask that again at the end. But what I'm going to show here is definitely one of the strongest Carcass clone rebirth bands of the new era. And you probably know who I'm talking about. This is Pharmacist out of Japan with medical renditions of grinding decomposition. And if that cover looks familiar, well, yeah, not only are these guys Carcass clones, but they ripped off the Pathologist album cover and then called themselves Pharmacist. I mean, come on, that's Carcassception twice now. We're beyond just a Carcass clone here when you're trying to clone Pathologist, who is a Carcass clone. But either way, it doesn't matter. This is sensational. Similar to County Medical Examiners, they're borderline copycats, more than just playing homage, but they do it so well. They really, really do. And it feels more fresh, probably because it's been 15 years since the last particular Gore Grind Carcass clone that I was aware of. The music kind of sounds like Symphony of Sickness. Obviously, that cover looks like Pathologist. And the band blew up a big way. There was a demo before this. I do have the CD. I didn't pull it out. EPs and things that were put together on a CD. But this full length in 2020, this just grabbed the internet. And I don't know if it was the COVID lockdowns or whatever, but everybody lapped this one up, including me. I guess, yeah, you've got Rebirthed Carcass, who are just going to release their second album since they've been back together. The time is ripe for all these new clone bands to come along. So, yeah, Pharmacist, though, out of Japan. It's just fantastic stuff. It really is. And again, that Symphonies of Sickness rear font. I love all the touches they do on these things. So, yeah, wonderful gory mess, this band. Pharmacist, not Pathologist, but they definitely try and look like Pathologist. Absolutely, they sound like Carcass. 2020 was really good to us with that Pharmacist album, but another that completely blew the barn doors off and had everyone very excited with only 21 minutes runtime, but this amazing cover artwork. Miasmatic Necrosis, with a great name too, out of the USA. This is their album Apex Profane. As far as I could tell, the only thing they've done. I didn't see any demos. I don't think anybody knew anything about them. And then bam, this thing's available with that cover artwork. Oh, man. This is what Recaputrefaction and by extension Regurgitate and Hemorrhage can sound like with top tier production. Razor sharp, amazing production, super, super heavy, pitch shifted vocals, 21 tracks, 21 minutes. This is Gore Grind for the 2020s. It follows that original rulebook pretty closely. Like I said, it has got the extension onto that Regurgitate sound, but really, that demo era Carcass and the Recaputrefaction stuff is really what's at the root here. And that cover artwork, oh my god, just amazing. Look at the skull. Beautiful stuff. Madcap Doctors. Not much left of the patient, though. This is Miasmatic Necrosis with Apex Profane out of America from 2020. 2021 now, and another relatively new band that I don't have a physical copy of yet. They've got 2 albums, and I really, really want the vinyl of them. Just proving a little bit difficult to get into the country. I'm talking about Sick Sinus Syndrome out of Czechia. 2 albums out so far, as I said. This one is the first. This one is the second. And this is where I was going to say, I'm going to bring it all back. This is Milos from Malignant Tumor wanting to play Gorgrind again and stop playing Motorhead type music. He's just come full circle here. And how's he going to do that after all these years? Well, he's going to get the bassist from Pathologist, who have been long broken up, and the former drummer of Heaving Earth, really good quality death metal band. And they're just doing that reek of Putrefaction and the Regurgitate style, pitch shifted, gory glory. It's essential stuff, and I really, really need to get copies of both the albums. But Swarming of Sickness, that's the real highlight. Good stuff here from Sick Sinus Syndrome out of Czechia. Going into 2022 now, and similar to Pharmacist with that Cloneception game, we have, and this is one I don't think many people know of, Infesta, not that Infesta, but this Infesta, who are also out of USA, with Dissection Ward Examinations. That's an incredibly blown up JPEG there, for sure, for an album cover. This is some pretty lean stuff here. I mean, this is all very... It's not even a real card. It's just a fold-over thing. You know, whatever, man. This is some DIY stuff. So yeah, not the dark death metal Infesta that we all know from 1992 or so. This is one machine, one drum machine, one man drum machine, Gorgrind stuff, playing very close to that Lymphatic Phlegm style. In fact, you could blindfold me, put this on, and tell me it's the new Lymphatic Phlegm, and I would go, "Yep, certainly is." It's just got that. I mean, the drum machine sound makes it sound like that. The ultra pitch shifted vocals, very, very low, and that what Lymphatic Phlegm do with the drum machine, they do a lot of little rolling little double kicks, like like that kind of thing. Infesta do the same thing here. They really have that same sound, and that eerie guitar and bass definitely being emulated here as well. So Cloneception time again. Infesta cloning a Lymphatic Phlegm who cloned Carcass. We're looking through the looking glass here, people. And yeah, Dissection Ward Examination. The best I can work out, this is the only thing you can get on a professionally released format from this band. The guy has got dozens of EPs and albums on CDR and I think home dub tape. This is the only thing you can find that's like a pro vinyl. It's a real vinyl. And I don't think there's any Glassmaster CDs. So yeah, very DIY stuff. And I'm just happy to have this thing. Number 86 of 100 from Bog Records. There you go. Great. Infesta with Dissection Ward Examinations. Really playing the Lymphatic Phlegm sound, which is by itself just playing Reek of Putrefaction. Staying in 2022 now, we have an international band. This is the really, really quite excellent and unfortunately quite short Putrefaction sets in. Very international band members in this one. This is Repugnant Inception of Decomposing Paroxysm. Such a Carcass title there. Very much, again, in that Reek of Putrefaction and by extension, Regurgitate sound. Very much in the grindcore, has that 4 count and then blast beat type stuff. Another great example, like I said, of Cloneception. Even closer ties to one level of those removed bands. It's got ex-Regurgitate members in it. Current members of Expurgo and the vocalist of Lymphatic Phlegm. So we're in Brazil. I mean, we're all over the shop here. This is an international Gorgrind supergroup. And, you know, with all those members, only one result was possible, and that is Reek of Putrefaction and Regurgitate. Pathological Gorgrind with that healthy D beat in it that you get, and pitch-shifted vocals and a decaying corpse. It's just, yep, this is great stuff. It's just too short. That's the only problem. Very short. I wish it was longer. Putrefaction sets in Repugnant Inception of Decomposing Paroxysm from 2022. What could be my only band out of Panama in my entire collection? We have Purulent Remains with Worm Eaten Corpse. This is a compilation. from 2023 of two 2022 EPs from the band. They released on tape first. There was Stages of Decomposition and Fermented Death. Great title, that one. Reissued here, one demo on each side, on a nice LP, Worm Eaten Corpse. And it's starting to get a little away from pure carcass worship here, if I'm being honest. I'm starting to hear more of Pathologist in it, but really I'm hearing that decaying death metal sound of Leprophiliac. So we are getting a little further away from the roots here, but really it's still Reeker Putrefaction, but then into that Leprophiliac, just digging up the graves kind of stuff, rather than stuffing around with the corpses. But yeah, it is a worm-eaten corpse here. They're still clearly influenced by the Big C. Their image is on point. I love the pink too. And if you look at the demo tapes, they use bright yellow and bright blue. Yeah, why not have the bright colors? And again, this is on Bog, Bringer of Gore. So yeah, just call it carcass worship. It may as well be. It's just a bit more of a morbid sound. So Purulent Remains out of Panama with the Worm Eaten Corpse compilation from 2023. Again in 2023 and back to the USA, we have Lipoma with Odes of Suffering, the Sophomore full length. This is a one-man band with a difference. Drum machine gore grind again that fits in with that Reeker Putrefaction and then by extension Lymphatic Phlegm. So we're in familiar territory here. But not only do these guys mix in Reek and Lymphatic Phlegm, but I hear surgical steel, melodic death metal, particularly in the lead guitars. It is such a mix here. That really is what stands this band apart. It's got the guitar leads and the solos of melodic death metal, the Bill Steer style stuff from Surgical Steel, and it's mixing it with the early raw sound of Carcass. Pathological gore grind with melodic death metal. Who'd have thunk it would work? But it really does. And it's odd, but it completely works. And the melodious moments act as like a breather from all the malpractice that's going on. So, yeah, really good stuff. I have to get the first album as well. Odes to Suffering. 16 tracks on here. This guy's clearly had a bad day. He's got the lipomas all over him. And, the old pentagram, because why not? We all like pentagrams. Lipoma, one of the newer bands doing the pathological gore grind and doing it with a little bit of a difference. And the last one I'm going to show, also from 2023, coming in at the tail end of that year, and also out of Japan with Pharmacist. This is Fester Decay with Reality Rotten to the Core. Itself sounding incredibly a Carcass title there. This is another Carcass clone out of Japan, playing very similar to Pharmacist, which is a very close approximation of Symphonies of Sickness. Their album came out in 2023, but the band did do a very original sort of Regurgitate style demo in 2016. They were a lot more raw back then, predating Pharmacist by 4 years. So you could say Fester Decay were doing the Carcass clone stuff 4 years earlier than Pharmacist were, but they didn't get their full length out until late last year. And I mean, look at it. I mean, just look at the thing. You know exactly what you're going to get. It even says there, Pathological Stench Gore Grind. You know what you're getting. This one's out on Everlasting Spew. A great label for putting out gore grind on. You're going to spew everywhere. But yeah, you are getting Symphony of Sickness style gore grind worship here. And it's fantastic. So yeah, Fester Decay, if you slept on it last year, give it a go. Great band out of Japan. So you will have noticed that I had a bit of a jump there from 2004 to 2020. That's because I'm not aware of any bands that stick close. And that's the thing. I'm not just saying any old gore grind band, but a band that sticks close to the Carcass formula in that era. Surely there's been heaps. And this is where I need your help. What bands between 2014 and 2020 were doing the pathological gore grind in the style of Reeker Putrefaction, Symphonies of Sickness, or Necroticism? Because I don't know them. I'd like to know them. So please fill me in. Make them known to me. As for what you have seen, I hope you did enjoy this bit of a probably quite lengthy walkthrough on all the Carcass clone bands I'm familiar with and I enjoy. Carcass, as I said, is my favorite band of all time. My favorite album of all time is Necroticism, and Symphonies is pretty close behind it. So I really enjoyed doing this one. I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you did, please like and subscribe. Check out this guy. Check out this guy. I'll see you next time.